Welcome to the Connection Central Industry Podcast, where real conversations meet real strategies. Each episode we dive into the industries that keep Australia moving, talking with the leaders, innovators, and everyday operators, shaping what's next. So settle in, turn it up, and let's get into it.
Hi everybody, Michelle O'Hara here for another Business Industry Podcast. Very lucky today to have Pete Seligman with us, SRO Technologies co-owner and managing director, as well as ETA investor. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an exciting time of year, coming back from Christmas and New Year's and looking forward to what's ahead for the next 12 months.
Awesome. No, great to have you. I think what I'd like to start first is I always like to share with the audience a little bit about how I found, or I guess stalked, my guests for these podcasts. When it came to you, Pete, what I found was SRO Technology actually popped up as interesting. And when I went and saw that you were the managing director, I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you had a lot of companies listed there that you were still involved with presently. So to me, that was, how does that work? So you'll explain that to the audience in a minute. And the other piece was when I went stalking a bit more, I found your website and I really loved the sentence, I'm on a mission to find and inspire the next generation of business owners. So what I'd really love for you to talk about, first of all, is tell us a little bit about your history and how all this has come about. And then we'll jump into sort of 2026 and what that might look like. Over to you.
Totally. Yeah, no, my pleasure. I mean, I won't bore you with the detail of my corporate career. You can stalk me as everyone else can stalk me also on LinkedIn to see that. But in very short order, I started life as an engineer, did some work in construction project management, moved into investment banking, and then did spend some time with kind of a large ASX listed entity in kind of general management roles. And that kind of I put under the bucket of my kind of quote unquote normal or corporate career. And then in 2012, decided that I wanted to do something a bit different. So I headed out with a mate of mine and we bought what at the time was a very small business called SRO Technology. And so that's the business that you're referring to there. We bought that back in 2013. So that was really, I guess you would say, the start of the journey that I'm still on, even though I've taken that journey through different chapters. So from 2013 to about 2020, I was the owner-operator of SRO, plus a handful of other businesses that me and my business partner bought along the way. And we've sold a couple of those. We still own a couple of those. And that was an excellent experience for me to move from a range of larger corporate roles into the cut and thrust of being a small business owner in Australia, which I now know is a very challenging but rewarding activity to embark on.
Very different.
I say that, before I left my corporate jobs, I think I would have definitely been one of those people that severely underestimated how hard it is to be a small business owner. And so I do try and encourage people to get as much perspective as they can on that before they make the big leap. I definitely don't regret it. I love doing what I do, but it's a very different world. So then in 2019,
so can you just share just a couple of those differences that you've noticed? Because I think probably the business owners would appreciate that as well.
So I often tend towards analogies. So I always try and think of a story or a picture I can build. It makes it easier for me to put things in context, but hopefully also explain them. I really enjoy sailing. I did a lot as a kid. I do as much as I can now. And one analogy that works well in this environment, I think, is the concept of a big boat and a small boat. So, I mean, we've just had Boxing Day come through with the Sydney to Hobart yacht race and all those massive yachts. Mm-hmm. So large corporates are like those big yachts, right? So they're large, they've got big teams. Each of the individuals on that boat have a very specialized role that they play. The boat itself has a lot of momentum. And so each individual, whilst performing an important task, the variability in their execution of that task has a relatively small impact on the overall progress of the boat, right? Compare that to on the same Sydney harbour, probably even on the same day, there would have been 16-foot skiffs and 18-foot skiffs sailing around the place with a crew of 2 or 3 people. If one of those people does even slightly the wrong thing, the whole boat can capsize, right? So the relative leverage or impact of each individual in a smaller boat is a much larger impact than what it would be on a bigger boat. Also, frankly, you get wetter on a smaller boat than you do on a bigger boat. You can stay dry on a big boat. You usually get wet in a small boat. So, things tend to hurt a bit more when things go wrong on a small boat than what they do on a big boat. I feel like you've got a little bit more influence and control. Like the momentum I referred to before on a big boat as an individual, and this is something I felt in corporate life, as an individual in a large corporate, both on the upside and the downside, your actions might have a effect, but not a very short cause and effect response, right? So, and if I was to do something wrong or miss a target in a month or screw something up, just the general flywheel and momentum of the large corporate just continues to chug on, right? So, whereas in a small business, like if something goes wrong, like you do need to fix it and it hurts a bit, right? But if something goes right and you get something to gel in the right way, it has a really great and noticeable impact. So for me, I think there were 2 main attributes that I was looking for at the time. One was autonomy and the other one was accountability. On the autonomy front, it probably is just what it says on the box. I was looking for something where I could have just more impact on the decisions that were being made and I could have a bit more influence over the direction that we were taking things, rather than navigating the large scale politics of a big organization rather than the small scale politics of a small opposite organization, because politics are always there because we're humans, right? So that was one thing. The other accountability piece was, I know it sounds strange, but I kind of wanted it to hurt if I fell over, right? Because that to me made the challenge feel real. Like it then meant that the decisions I was making were important, because if I made the wrong one, it was going to, whereas sometimes in a large corporate, obviously people are well-intended and want to make the good decisions all the time. But like if you slightly make a bad decision in one role in a large corporate, it's probably not going to shake the whole thing off kilter. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of scale, a matter of influence, momentum and impact.
Yeah, great analogy, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
And also, I think I often say like the Titanics versus so interesting you're using the boating analogy, because, I say being smaller, we can make a decision and shift and pivot quite quickly, whereas the bigger boys sometimes can't. So that's why we have to remain relevant and, adaptive, particularly in the current market. My goodness.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we made that change. Like I made that change in 2013 and embarked on that journey. I've got a lot of interesting and sometimes funny stories to tell about how I tried to bring some of that corporate approach into small business and it failed dramatically. So there's a lot of lessons to learn about what works and what doesn't. I'm always an advocate for transferable skills in any environment, but there are definitely some things to learn about small business that won't translate neatly from big business. So and anyone that's made that transition will know what I'm talking about. So yeah, then in kind of 2019, 2020, and not COVID related, I always need to point out that the next kind of slight shift I made in my approach didn't have anything to do with COVID. It was more 2019. I was kind of coming to a point where I either was going to buy another business and drop in and run it, or do something else, because I got to the next. So basically, I'd buy a business, drop in, make myself redundant, and then either we would exit it or not, but I would effectively make myself redundant so we could buy another one, and then I'd drop in and run the next one. Sometimes there was overlap, but I got to 2019 and had made myself redundant again, and had to work out what to do next. Coincidentally, came across the concept of a search fund, and I won't go into that detail now. Happy to if you want, but it's a funding model that's used in other markets and now in Australia and New Zealand for investors to back entrepreneurs into the acquisition of small businesses. So I thought that was great, because the only other option for me was either to go and run a business or to raise capital to start buying bigger businesses. But I really liked the size of business that I was involved with, so I wanted to keep investing in that level, but I didn't know how to do it without me being the CEO. So this model gave me the opportunity to say, well, maybe I can take the experience that I've got and some of the capital I've generated over the deals that I've done and use that to back other entrepreneurs to follow a similar path. So that's effectively what I've been doing for the last 6 years is investing in other entrepreneurs who have then headed out and found businesses to buy, acquired them, dropped in as the CEO. And so a number of the other entities that you'll see on my LinkedIn profile is some of the boards that I've joined of companies that have been acquired by entrepreneurs that I've backed.
Right. That does make
So,
sense.
but SRO, which is the first one we ever bought, is still there. And that's still a significant part of what me and my business partner are interested in continuing to grow. I think we had 4 or 5 employees when we bought it. We're now approaching 90 or 100 employees. We had one office. We've now got a national footprint. So that's continuing to provide really exciting opportunities for us to continue building that team.
You make it sound so easy when you just say, you invest in a company and you just make yourself redundant and then just
Yeah, that's
move on
not
and
fun.
get
That's not easy. That's not.
I think that's the biggest thing that every business owner on a scaling journey wants to do. But any
Yeah.
tips? I mean, I know it's not an easy thing, but
Yeah, I think
any tips for people on that?
I think a few years ago, and it's probably still on there, I think I wrote a blog on LinkedIn called something like Redundancy and the Art of Delegation or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I read that
But
one. That was good.
But yeah, it's hard. It's not easy at all making yourself redundant. I think there is practicality involved. I think there's also psychology and ego involved.
Hmm.
And I think that that's true, particularly for anyone who was the founder of a business. If you think about, there's a large chunk of businesses. So there's something like, what's the number? Is it 1.2 point something million Australian businesses by ABN registration across the country? Some ridiculously small number in the hundreds are kind of listed entities of a large scale. There's something like 150,000 of that 2 million number has earnings between 1 and 4 or 5 million. So, employees between kind of 10 and 100. And then there's probably 1.8 million of those entities that have employees of less than 5, right? So they're all your sole traders, cafes, tradies and all that sort of stuff, right? So there's a large chunk of those businesses that are really, really small. And then there's like a couple of 100,000 that are not even, like when you talk about SMEs, I guess they're mid-size, but they're even just slightly under that mid-size level. Something like a business that has anywhere between 10 and 30 employees. Often you find, well, I've found that businesses grow to that point and then hit like a glass ceiling.
Yes.
And that to me is just a relatively simple span of control limitation. So in order to grow from, call it 20 or 25 employees to 50, whoever is at the top of that puzzle needs to know how to delegate. So I remember when I was working at Macquarie, each time you were promoted to the next level, like it'd be like becoming a manager, and then it would be managing managers, and then it would be managing senior managers. And like each different layer was like, how do you get further and further away from the coalface and still be effective? And the same thing happens when you're a small business owner. Like if you've got 10 employees, you can be directly involved with everything that everyone's doing. But if you've got 50 employees, you just can't. And so therefore you need to somehow get comfortable with delegating to a layer that's going to actually do stuff that previously you used to do. So there's this really interesting interaction between delegation and redundancy. And a big part of that is acknowledging that almost no one is going to do the things that you used to do in the way that you used to do them. And maybe they'll get a better outcome than you. Maybe they'll get a worse outcome than you, but 80% that allows you to go and do something else is probably better than you staying there to get 100%, right? So
not growing. Yeah.
it's hard, but I do think that the for all of the businesses that I've been involved in buying either for myself or for other entrepreneurs, the first and easiest lever to growth is team development and delegation. As soon as you unlock that team to actually take on some of that autonomy and authority, you get an immediate kick in terms of growth. But it can be super hard for whoever the founder was to take that step.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it leads in really nicely to my next question. At the end of last year, I know with a lot of our clients that, people are absolutely stuffed, right? There's up and down, between the elections and there's always something, lack of staff, the rising costs, etc. By the end of December, everybody was exhausted. And I sort of feel like coming back for 2026, already talking to people, they're already quite overwhelmed and they're starting the year stuffed. And I think, didn't realize myself, this was the first year that I actually went away on holiday and I wasn't exhausted. And it made me, I know, it made me go, oh, hang on, I can think really clearly now where, for those who are coming back tired, trying to strategize, trying to think about what the year ahead looks like is actually almost impossible. So I guess what I'd love to hear from you is your thoughts on, well, A, what you think sort of 2026 is going to look like, but potentially for those business owners, any sort of tips around, what should you do when you're in that situation? Have you ever been in that situation yourself, actually? I don't know if
Yeah.
probably too
So,
organized, but
yeah, I mean, no, not at all. So
Yep.
I mean, I'm of my own, and I run a bunch of other kind of ETA community events. I've, by my own admission, have too much on my dance card at the moment, right? So like, definitely, and the thing that I find is that because I'm spread across so many different businesses, it's highly likely that one or two of them is going to be going really well at any point in time. But it's also highly likely with that many in the stable that there will be a couple that are going through a struggle at any point in time. So it means that 100% of the time I'm dealing with a problem, because if you have one, then you'll have like good times and bad times. Like, so all of mine are doing that. And so I've always got bad times. It means I've also always got good times.
it's always something. Yeah.
I think I'm just trying to think of like just a range of things that come to mind. 2026, I think for me, ultimately, who knows really? I do think that from an economic macro perspective, as it relates to small business, whilst there could be some existing either headwinds or tailwinds, I can't see any material change to those dynamics. So I'm not saying that so for every single business and industry sector, like I've got some businesses that are in, food products and medicinal products wholesaling, and I've got others that are in mining instrumentation and others that are in cybersecurity. So there's no kind of blanket comment around what's going to happen from a sector point of view across all three of those sectors, because they will perform very, very differently. But I don't see any massive change to the underlying environment. There are good things and bad things happening in the moment, but there's no like massive trigger that I think, like a couple of years ago as we were kind of coming out of COVID, there was like these big shifts that could happen. I don't see 2026 being anything where there's going to be some major fundamental change. So I think that what that means, that regardless of whether or not you're sitting in a position where for your business and your market, it's a struggle, my gut tells me that you probably already know the struggle. Even though there is a struggle, at least you know it. It's not like there's going to be, I don't anticipate there's going to be some new struggle arise. So at least it's like when you're watching a scary movie, like before the monster comes up, everyone's really, but as soon as you see them for the first time, you're like, it's not scary anymore. I've seen the monster, right? So I feel like there's a bit of that going on. There are some markets that have some good tailwinds that are coming through in 2026. There are others that will still struggle, but I don't see any massive shift. I think ultimately, though, the way that I've always thought about small business is most small businesses operate in markets in which they are a relatively small proportion of their total market, right? So what that also means is that unless you're facing, and I've been in this experience before, I was a shareholder in a wholesale travel business in the era that hotel beds and Airbnb and all those sorts of things were launching. And so that's what you call a serious headwind that is almost impossible to fight against. So I know what that looks like. But for most small businesses, if the current is stagnant or even running against you, there's usually more things you can do internally for your business and with your direct customers to catalyze growth and opportunity than what the market can do to you in a negative sense. So as long as there's no massive headwind, then there's probably more moves you can make to things that are within your control than getting too worried about what the market's going to do to you, right?
Mm.
And I do think that there's truth to that. But even if there's not truth to that, that puts you in a position of feeling like you're in control of something that you can do, which I think is powerful anyway, right? So I think for me, a saying that I really like, and it's something that I say quite often to my team at SRO when we're having kind of leadership meetings as well, is that most people overestimate what you can achieve in a short period of time and underestimate what you can achieve in a long period of time.
Mm.
And the way that translates to business planning is just work in small chunks, right? Like a lot of people come back and look at 2026 and say, what are the 10 new things we're going to do this year? It's like, no, just do like 2. And because what will probably happen is if you only put 2 on your list, it won't take you a year to do them. You'll actually get it done in 6 months and then you'll be able to add another 2, right?
Yes. And you
Whereas
won't
if
be
you
as overwhelmed.
Whereas if you do 10, you'll just spend the whole year worrying about all 10 and get nothing done, right? So I think there are
That's correct.
some very simple ways you can distill the things that are important to you and your business into a much shorter list and actually make good progress over like unexpectedly good progress over a slightly longer period of time rather than no progress over a short period of time. And if you recognize that movement forward, you will then get effectively the dopamine hit that you need to say, we are actually making progress. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that I've been leaning into a fair bit over the last 12 months in my businesses is on 2 fronts. One is the concept of values, but I don't mean in kind of the fluffy, let's go read a nice book about business values sense. And let's write all the normal ones like, integrity and blah, blah, and whatever. What I more mean is actually thinking about the values as a strategic lever. So for your business to be successful, what are the things that you or behaviors that you as a team should value in order to perform well in your market for your business, right? And then after deciding those, and you don't need to overcook it, they're going to be 80% right, 20% wrong anyway, right? Actually using them to make decisions. So then actually saying, okay, so now we're caught in this thing. Should we service this customer or that customer? Or should we give a discount here or not do there? Or this employee kind of screwed up. How should we deal with that situation? Like actually go back and look at your values and say, well, what did we say we value? How would they tell us to respond in this particular situation? And I think that is a really powerful way to help get clarity around decision making. And then the other thing that I'd say that I'm finding really interesting to play with as a concept around performance as well is, and it's a hard one to describe, but when you or your team is being successful, how does that feel? Or when you're not being successful, how does that feel? So then you can try and index for doing those things and performing in that way that generates that feeling that you're trying to create within your team. So a couple of years ago in SRO, we had grown like massively, like really quickly, like too quickly, frankly. And some of our system processes were struggling. We've still got another project that we're implementing in the next 12 months to continue improving the way our internal systems work to keep up with the growth. But at the time, the bit of feedback that it took me a while to get directly because I wasn't asking the right questions was like, how does everyone actually feel? And the words that came back was in front of the customer, they weren't feeling confident that they could make promises that they could then deliver against. Like that they weren't confident that if they said, I can get you a product in 4 weeks, they could actually get it in 4 weeks because it might take 6. They weren't sure that the machine would deliver. Or when they opened up a system and looked at a report, they weren't sure that the numbers were right because they knew that there was other things going on that might have made it not quite right. And so we had this feeling of confidence and efficiency and success. And so now like one of our regular checkpoints is like, how's everyone feeling? Like, are you generally feeling confident and efficient and successful? And it's actually a super easy way. It's like when I think about safety, everyone talks about like, well, particularly like my biggest business is in mining. So there's a lot of focus on safety. And there's a lot of systems and processes and things you can do to maximize the safety of an environment. But the simplest question you can ask anyone in the moment is, do you feel safe right now? And like immediately they'll know. They're like, nah, it just doesn't feel right. Like that ladder just doesn't look right, or the handrail doesn't feel right to me. Like there's no detailed analysis. It's like, does it feel safe? Like you're watching what that guy's doing. Do you feel safe for him right now or not? You know, it's like when you speak to a customer,
Simple.
you don't need 10 questions. You just say, would you recommend us to your friend? Right. I find the same thing from an internal point of view. Like, how does it feel right now? Like, do we feel confident in what we're doing? And I think that for small business owners, whether they ask the question of themselves or their team, regardless of how big it is, they'll get a sense of if there's something they need to change in the way they're doing things, how much they're taking on, whether or not they're moving too fast. Because that feedback of the feeling, I think actually has a lot more value than what people give it credit for. It's very easy to measure the metrics. You know, what do the dollars say? What do the outputs say? What are all the things that we can measure in the workshop or whatever else? But like, what's the kind of sense that the team is getting? And I've seen it ebb and flow in my business over the last 12 months. Like there are some quarters where everyone's like, actually this quarter we're feeling like super confident, like we've done a great job and it's feeling good. And that doesn't mean it stays. This quarter, I don't know, like, you know, we said yes to too many things last quarter. We're now like, you know, a bit of steam's coming out of the engine. So yeah, I think to bring it all back to the beginning again, 2026, I think there aren't going to be any massive swings in either direction. So kind of what you can see now is probably what you're going to be living with for 12 months. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Much better to get two things done well than, you know, make 20% progress on 10 and spend some time thinking about values as a strategic lever and how that makes your team feel in execution.
Old. I love that actually. I mean, we live a lot by our values and behaviors. So, but I love how you put that. That's really interesting. And I think with culture playing such a big part with the lack of staff, etc., that is really well, you've defined that beautifully. And look, we've come to the end, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway, because I want to know. So one of the pieces I guess you mentioned was all the different types of businesses you said and the different industries. So diversification sort of popped into my head, and interviewing different guys lately of all the bigger companies, it's a piece that everybody, they like exactly what you said. They've noticed shifts within the business and certain trends coming. So they'll go, oh, we better diversify now just to cover that. Like, so for example, move into this area because this one might be dying, whatever. Just talk to me a little bit about how you choose, how you diversify to what companies and things like that, because I think that would be really helpful too.
So if I answer in relation to my investment portfolio, my diversification isn't deliberate necessarily in that sense. I've identified individuals that I think could be great entrepreneurs and could be great business leaders, and I've backed them and they've bought businesses, and those businesses I've helped them understand for their own benefit, but ultimately it's a business that is best suited to them. So it's not like I've said, I really need exposure to this sector, so I'm going to go and invest there. It's me saying, I actually think that person looks great. They've then found business XYZ, and I said, actually, you're right. That looks like a great fit for you. How can we help you get into it? So and kind of the spread of my investment across those entrepreneurs is just me continuing to get excited about all the great people that are coming through the pipe. And, you know, and there's some things I'm doing in 26 to continue kind of enabling me to keep backing more entrepreneurs. So,
Nice.
but then if I think about SRO technology, which is my kind of the main business that I'm involved with, we have over the last, I mean, when we first bought it, I mean, it was very small, so it didn't have the scope to be very broad and diversified in its services and products, but it was a relatively narrow product and service offering into a relatively narrow customer set. Whereas if you fast forward to today, the breadth geographically from a product range perspective and application point of view to the services we provide and also to the sectors, the industry sectors that we work with is significantly more diversified. And that was a deliberate effort because we could see that there was a common thread of capability and approach that we could leverage across other products and services and other geographies and other industry sectors. And so we've been quite deliberate in our attempt to build out that diversification. And that's definitely serving us well now and will continue to serve us into the future. But that's diversification, not even just in terms of kind of revenue diversification. It's every single industry sector, geography, geography, think globally, geography, and also business model within those. Also has things like it might have a working capital diversification impact, right? So some products and services into some industry sectors have particular payment terms that are different to this product into this sector, right? And so those, you might use the payment terms of this business line to fund the payment terms of this business line, right? And this one on its own might be very capital intensive that'll cost you a lot of money. Whereas if you've got some diversification across those different sectors, it's not just the revenue diversification you get, it's also the business model diversification that you get.
So do you think 2026 businesses should, I guess you need to leave me with at least one thing.
Yep.
This has all been wonderful. I guess if you had to leave one piece of advice, you've got so many different business entrepreneurs you work with. What's the one piece of advice you would suggest for people for 2026 that they should really sort of nut out, or whether it's a mindset thing, whatever it is, to get them through successfully?
Okay, I'll try and pick one. I'll just pick one. I'll pick one. It doesn't mean that it's the only one, and it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best one, but it's the one that jumps into my mind. So, and it's probably just the call that I came off before jumping onto this call, but I think a lot in business and definitely in entrepreneurship through acquisition, or ETA, which is where I spend all of my time, but a lot in ETA, in business, and let's say like in life in general, self-awareness is really, really important. And I mean self-awareness, there's lots of different angles you could take that, like self-awareness in a group or self-awareness in whatever. But the one angle I mean in relation to self-awareness is really, if you're a business owner, for example, having a really good think about why is it that you're doing this? And what are the things that either you started, why did you start it, and why did you love it back then? And how can you reconnect with what it is that you love about doing? Also, like your own self-awareness around what is the most value that I can add to this team based on what I'm doing, and are the things that I'm doing that I'm just doing because I think I should do them, or because I don't think anyone else can do them, but actually I'm not the best person to do it. Like really thinking clearly about why it is that you're doing what you're doing and how you can integrate with your business and your team in the most value adding way. Because it's very easy as a small business owner, particularly when you started as one and as a founder, to feel obliged to be involved with everything and to think that there's no one else that could possibly do it unless you do it yourself. So just spending some time reflecting on what it is, what are the things that you really enjoy doing the most in your business? Where do you have the highest and best value use? How can you engage more of your team in getting involved in some of the stuff that actually they should be doing and not you be doing? And how can you start to think about where you want to be so you can start taking your business in that direction? But I don't think enough people spend time reflecting on, me included, frankly, on that self-awareness piece to make sure that they're making those decisions in the right way. And I think that even more so for smaller businesses than for bigger ones, the owner, operator, founder is such a big impact on the whole dynamic that if they don't spend some time thinking about how they want to show up and what they want to get out of it and how they should be integrating with the rest of the team, it can have a really big impact.
Gold. That's gold. Now, Pete, obviously people will be hearing this and think you're phenomenal and want to work with you. Are you this year looking to invest in more entrepreneurs, or is that your goal? So then people can contact you, or?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, the way that I separate my thought process or put my working life into buckets these days is kind of three main buckets. Like one bucket being SRO technology, which is like my main baby. That's where I spend my time working very closely with that team. The second bucket being my investment portfolio and investing in entrepreneurs to head out and find businesses to buy. And within that bucket, just leading through to the end of the last year, I partnered with a couple of other major investors and operators in the space and also a local private equity firm. We raised $70 million to deploy into more ETA investment across Australia and New Zealand. So we're absolutely looking for more investment opportunities, more entrepreneurs to back, more small business acquisitions to do. So that's definitely a big part. And then my third bucket is kind of my ETA community bucket. So that's where I do things like kind of run annual events for the ETA community and get involved in helping to connect people in that space. So equally, if there's investors or advisors or entrepreneurs that are interested in that space, regardless of which bucket it falls into, I'm always happy to chat.
Where's the fun bucket?
Yeah.
Time for that.
Well, no, there's just, that's a separate, that's a separate bucket. Those are just the 3 work buckets. And to be honest, like, and this goes to the self-awareness thing, like I find all 3 of those fun, right?
Okay.
I think that's, and that's a really important part of that process is to try and, I remember I had a meeting with Alan Moss, who was one of the very early employees, maybe you call him founder of Macquarie Bank. He left a few years after I joined back in the early thousands. And I, as a very junior analyst, had to go and present something to him, and I called him out of a meeting. Well, I didn't. His EA called him out of a meeting. I was like, please don't interrupt. And when he came out of the meeting, he said, oh, thank God, I was really bored in there. It's nice to come out and have an opportunity to have a break. And I said to him at the time, I said, surely by the time you become like the head of a large investment bank, you get to choose how you spend your time, and you're only spending your time doing stuff you enjoy. And he said, no, regardless of how far things go and how far you get in your career, there's always a percentage of stuff that you have to do that you don't want to. It's only a matter of continually trying to increase the good stuff and reduce the bad stuff, right? And so I've always remembered that. There's always stuff you have to do you don't want to, but if you know that each year you go forward, you're doing slightly more good stuff, then that's a good thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today. You've given so many great nuggets. Can't wait to see the mini clips, actually. But thank you so much for joining us today, Pete. Appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. Have a good 26.
You too.